am very happy to have our panelists here on the stage for Policy Watch, Legislation Affecting Your Downtown. We are joined today by Representative Eleni Kavros Degraw, who is the Chair of Planning and Development, Representative Maria Horn, the Chair of Finance, Revenue, and Bonding, and Alder Caroline Tanbee Smith of the 9th Ward of New Haven, with Ryan Bingham, the co-president of Sullivan and LeShane, and a Connecticut Main Street Center board member and past president as moderator. We all know that policy at both the state and local level have an impact on our downtowns, and I'm really excited by all of the conversations that we're going to have moments from now. And thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And we're very glad to have a break between Kevin pumping up the crowd and now. So we're really glad to be here. Before I introduce our panelists here, I do want to recognize two other state representatives. They don't know that I am going to do this, so I apologize. Representative Ritigliano and Representative Reddington Hughes. So give them a round of applause as well for being here. And if I missed anybody else, you can yell at me later. So good morning. Our 45 minutes or so is called Policy Watch, Legislation Affecting Your Downtown, and the premise is simple. The policies we set in Hartford and in our town halls can either breathe life into our downtown or quietly hold it back. I'm lucky to have three incredible leaders here with us that live this reality from three very different vantage points. Caroline, who is representing, we'll call it the urban area. She represents Ward 9 on the New Haven Board of Alders. Before that, she co-founded Collab, an accelerator that helps New Haven residents start businesses and create local jobs. And she has championed Best City to Start, which is an awesome program focused on streamlining our permitting processes and licensing processes for small neighborhoods in New Haven. And she brings this urban lens, a city where the questions are about neighborhoods, density, and small businesses. Representative Eleni Kavros Degraw serves Avon and Canton in the 17th District and is House Chair of the Planning and Development Committee, the committee that touches land use, zoning, and how our towns grow. She brings the suburban Farmington Valley lens to the conversation as well. And last but certainly not least, Representative Maria Horn, who represents the city's 64th district. She can name all 9 towns that she represents in the northwest corner. She is the House Chair of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, which means she sits at the intersection of policy and the dollars that fund it. She brings also a rural lens of 9 small towns doing big things with limited resources. So, 3 very different places, one shared question. What does it take in policy and in practice to make a place feel like a community? Let's get into it. So we have the first question, unless I said something that you need correcting thus far.
All good.
We're good, okay. We're gonna start wide, and this question is to all 3 women here. In your own community or district, where is the town center right now? And what's one recent thing that you've worked on at the state or local level that you think is moving the needle for your downtown, town center, or broadly town centers throughout the state? I'll let you.
Happy to start. First of all, just thank you so much to Michelle. Thank you so much to Ryan for bringing us all together today, and in particular for me on a personal level to share the stage with 2 remarkable, amazing women who I've admired your work from afar for a long time, and you just set such a trajectory and role model for so many young women across the state. So just thank you both for the work that you do. So you know, I have the privilege to represent the amazing city of New Haven, and you know, we have a thriving downtown with which, you know, at the heart is our New Haven Green, which in many ways is a collision of both some of the greatest opportunities that we have as a city, as well as some of our deepest challenges. I think one of the reasons why I fell in love with New Haven when I was 17 years old is because we're a city of neighborhoods. And so something that's really special about New Haven is that each neighborhood has a commercial corridor that's part of its spine. A spine of local businesses that become a part of people's everyday days, whether it's the coffee shop they go to in the mornings or the place they end on a busy Friday. I think it's really prescient that Lizzie Donius, who leads the Westville Village Renaissance Alliance, is winning the Founders Award this year because she has transformed the Westville commercial corridor over the course of the last several years. And so I think that's something that's special about New Haven is this we have our heartbeat in the middle of the city, but then we have these spines that spread throughout the entire city. I think the last thing I'll say is I've had the privilege, as Ryan mentioned, to work on a policy campaign called Best City to Start. And really the heart of it is around how do we take some of the rules that we have control of as a city to make it easier for small businesses to start, to make it more affordable, more accessible. Can we look at some of our fines and fees and say, do these make sense anymore? Maybe they made sense 10, 15 years ago, but maybe they don't make sense now. Can we look at some of our steps in the process for starting a business and deduplicate those barriers to make it easier for someone to take something that's an idea and turn it into a storefront? So I'm sure we'll dig into it a little bit more, but it's been so exciting to bring a coalition of entrepreneurs, organizations, leaders like Lizzie together to explore how do we look at our rules and actually have a culture change, to say let's take these rules that used to perhaps make sense and actually say how do we change them collectively as a city to make it easier for small businesses to have a fighting chance to be able to start.
Because I represent 9 small towns, it can be a very distinct conversation than either of my colleagues here. And I want to just join Caroline also, what a privilege it is to be up here with all 3 of you who are leaders in many, many ways for our municipalities. And to see this packed room, tuning into this topic, it's really important and affirming to see. So in my small towns, first of all, I want to emphasize what makes a small town tick is its individuality and understanding the community of each one. And as I think about sort of the Main Street, the central area of each of my towns, and they are, for small towns that have a lot in common, they are wildly disparate. And I think one of Kevin's points earlier, some of those chief elected will tell you they aren't interested in economic development. Put pause in that. Other people are, and in fact they are, even if they don't think they are. But what drives people to come into and to walk through, small town districts can be very different. I have a couple towns that have pretty robust chambers that maintain an active cadre of small businesses and make sure that those storefronts are filled and vibrant and that people are coming to it, including hosting a, Gilmore Girls Festival in one of my towns. That's what brings people there because that's what it evokes. In my own small town, I tell you one of the things that brings people downtown, goats. Weird, right? But we have a local business owner who ran a cafe, and as that cafe sort of shifted to more of a catering business, she used the sort of space next door to have a bunch of goats and chickens. And I tell you, that's what brings people to downtown, to walk through and to see the goats. And by the way, go to the other cafe and to visit the local businesses in that town. So it is widely different. I would say that in terms of sort of infrastructure, one of the things that is really helping my small towns, to your point about neighborhoods and there being a spine through, some of those spines in those small towns are state roads and people travel too fast on them. And so DOT, I want to give some extra props to for their investment in some traffic slowing mechanisms that have made it safer, and also investment in sidewalks, which I live pretty close to my own downtown area, and now my road tees into the Main Street. And when I stop at that stoplight, people are walking past now because they are walking from their homes into downtown with their shopping bag on their shoulder. And that's fantastic because we really need that community of people getting out of their cars, walking around, seeing each other, meeting on the town green. And that's what builds up, activity in those areas and interest in our small towns. So I'll stop there because I know you said this was supposed to be brief, Ryan. So.
So it's interesting. I represent obviously the suburban perspective for Avon, but I would say that Canton is more of my small, really, there's that very small town. They're a member of Main Street, which is fantastic in Collinsville. And if you haven't been to Collinsville, I highly recommend it. It literally looks like a Hallmark movie. It's not Gilmore Girls, but it's definitely Hallmark. The rest of it is very rural farmland. I know when I'm knocking doors, those driveways are very far apart. But I think that it's interesting. The community in Canton is very apparent, and it's focused, and having that Collinsville downtown where they do a lot with the arts, that has been awesome. Again, the sidewalks are huge because we did a huge sidewalk improvement. Again, shout out to DOT because we have that same issue in parts of Canton where they are using those sort of darts, I call them, on the roads to slow people down, which is critically important because we do want more bikers, walkers, also rails to trails, doing more connectivity with our rails to trails. I think that is what's driving community a lot in Canton. Avon is a little bit different, and I think some of the development in terms of transit-oriented districts or transit-adjacent districts, Avon's never really had quite of a downtown, and we're starting to actually have that now because of where Whole Foods decided to locate, and then there's a commercial conversion housing project happening, which will drive a lot of people to that downtown area. It's going to be a transit-oriented district because of our lovely one bus a day. That's where I still argue with DOT because now we have more people, and God knows I would love a microgrid there. But we've always been known as a bedroom community, so I think that we've also looked to some of our businesses to drive that community feel. We have a local coffee shop who's really been helpful with that. They're putting in a playground right next to the coffee shop, and I think that'll help further drive community. But trying to figure out ways that representing these very different, disparate communities and still representing them well and getting them what they need in terms of bonding dollars, et cetera, and finding these new districts and ways to connect them to more people so that more people feel like we have an identity. And I think that's part of what Main Street does. And quick shout out to my favorite, Michelle McCabe.
Yeah, quick round of applause for Michelle. Quick applause break. We're going to kick it right back to you, Eleni. So you're the chair of the Planning and Development Committee, and there's tons of bills that went, in and out of your committee this year. But one in particular we want to focus on is tackling blight and vacant property. You made that a priority. Please walk us through the work, what's that committee, what that bill entailed. And then any other bills that you're proud of that came out of the committee. So the floor is yours.
So the vacancy bill, Michelle and I had this conversation months and I guess in the winter, and it was the challenge of you have that first floor commercial, and yet it's sitting empty and it continues to sit empty, and how do you sort of revitalize a downtown that has perhaps apartments above, but this first floor commercial is empty. And so we talked about, could you incentivize pop-ups? Could you, that sort of delicate balance between you want to encourage more businesses to be there, but should we be perhaps offering a small fee, penalty, whatever you want to call it, to not keep those spaces open? And it was a fascinating conversation for me because it's a little different in Avon, where I have since 2017 looked around and said, okay, this building has been sitting empty for 10 years, this has been sitting empty for 5 years, this has been sitting empty. And when you, I'm sure many of your communities have that. It became a fascinating discussion, honestly, amongst the members of the committee on both sides of the aisle, because it looks a little different in every community. In some communities, yes, it's that first floor that's vacant, and in other communities, it's these whole, in many of our small towns, we have things that were formerly houses that became businesses, but then people choose not to rent them out and they take the tax deduction. And okay, that's great, but that's not helping us as a town build the tax base. It's not helping us build the community. It's not bringing in new businesses. And some chambers are better than others at this, of having a sandwich board out that says, hey, picture your business here. But I think that challenge is that we have to find ways, and that was what we were seeking to do with this bill legislatively, was to say, okay, we're going to give the town the option of, if you wanted to set up a dollar amount per square feet of, if you can't get it rented by such and such, then we are going to charge you this, some sort of carrot and stick approach. And And we really, it was great to get it out of committee. Again, we had bipartisan support. We were building in safety valves for, okay, well, if at least you would allow pop-ups to happen there, then you wouldn't end up with this fee. And I tell the story of, as a Democrat, we're always looking for our headquarters every year. And every year we go to multiple people, and some are willing to rent to us and some are not. Every single space that we have occupied in the town of Avon has gone on to be rented. They were all commercial spaces. They've all gone on to be rented after we've vacated because they saw the hubbub, they saw the activity, they saw people in and out of there. And so that's where these pop-ups, we thought, would be a good sort of incentive. Like, well, at least if you could get somebody in the space short term, then maybe you could get somebody in that space longer term. Michelle and I have worked on a lot of blight projects over the years, and I think that just trying to get people to understand that it's almost like broken windows theory. These aren't true broken windows, but if the space sits empty for too long, it really is harming long-term your thriving downtown. So we did not get it through this year, unfortunately. I would love to go back at this again because I think it really is critical for us to have more tools in the toolbox again. We need to look more at, sort of looking to the future, more of a program around facades. I know we have a lot of towns. Chris Edge, if you're out there somewhere, is always talking to me about the facade improvements. I think that's really critical for our downtowns in terms of how we can help. And just trying to get as much, we are always open to ideas for what the Planning and Development Committee can do that is assisting you in the hard work of making these downtowns as thriving as possible. And we know it's tough because post-pandemic, getting folks in these brick and mortar spots is more challenging. So we did have some concern over, well, if it's a fee, it's like, yeah, but if that space had sat empty for 15 years, don't you think they ought to have some skin in the game as an owner of the space? And so we're just trying to balance that out, but certainly open to suggestion. But I do believe we would be able to get it passed next year. So we're going to definitely go back at that.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Representative Horn, Maria, as the House Chair of Finance, Revenue, and Bonding, you are central to standing up the CMDA, Connecticut Municipal Development Authority. I think we're going to hear from them later today. And to supporting the arts, culture, and tourism funding. What role do you see for state bonding and revitalizing downtowns, and how do you think about, as you're getting all of these requests as the chair, on the return on investment for the state?
So now I switch from my sort of very granular little town perspective to the big perspective for the state. And first of all, I do think I do chair the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, which means the bonding part of it is the use of the state's credit card to invest. And these are investments. They do pay off, and they do return to Connecticut in both ways, tangible and monetary, and also, societal. We are in need. I think there is a great hunger for community among people, and so there's a great alignment of that interest with economic development right now. And that is, of course, and I'm glad you'll hear in more detail about CMDA. It's about, the big picture, taking a look at investments statewide, but it's also investing in, again, like the ski jump in one of my towns is a big tourist attraction. And so making sure that it's got Olympic standing and making sure that it continues to have that Olympic standing because it draws a lot of people to its events. It is investment. Sometimes it's investment in a clinic because it's across the street from the grocery store and the car repair place, and it's where everybody comes regularly to do their errands, and that's what brings them in. And again, keeps people healthy, also keeps them part of the community. So that investment on the bonding end continues to be very important, and I hope we continue to look at it both programmatically from the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority and also individual projects located in districts throughout the state. I will also then mention another initiative that has moved through various committees and through the Finance Committee, which I remain committed to, and that's arts, culture, and tourism, because the arts, in terms of many municipalities throughout, and certainly in my district, the arts have been central to revitalizing areas that have some blight and to being able to take over spaces and make them appealing, for hopefully, low cost that can help a community get started. And also, I mean, for my district, again, arts, culture, and tourism, that's what economic development is in my area. And it's attractive, and it's exciting, but it is also a very successful business. It also has an incredible return on investment, and we have had proposals over the years to find a way. I do not think Connecticut invests enough in that, and we're missing a real opportunity, I think, right now. We have tried various ways to try to set aside some money to invest in that. It's been an uphill struggle. We're not done because, again, it takes many forms. So it is, again, it is a major, economic driver in my part of the state, but it's also, the maintenance of, museums. It's about our history, and it's about maintaining that through line into the future. And I fear that if we don't continue to invest in those, we're going to lose something that will be very hard to recover. So stay tuned for more on that.
Big decisions. Alder, Caroline Tanbee Smith. Caroline, you've been a strong advocate for revitalization in the neighborhoods around downtown New Haven. You talked about it in your opening comments, but not just the Central Business District. From your seat on the Board of Alders, how have you been able to support the neighborhood level development, not just central area, and what have you learned that smaller towns might borrow?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ryan. I'd say for New Haven, what we don't have a dearth of is energy. We have no dearth of brilliant ideas in every single neighborhood for individuals who want to take a risk on behalf of their community, which I think is the definition of entrepreneurship, is taking a risk on behalf of us to support us as a community. We have no dearth of that kind of energy in every single neighborhood, but we do have bottlenecks. We do have areas where entrepreneurs get stuck in the process, whether it's getting stuck at City Hall because they're not sure where to go, or once they actually want to grow into a storefront, which is why I'm so excited about this creativity around policies to make it easier to access a storefront. How do we support entrepreneurs through those bottlenecks? And that's really the heart of the policy campaign around Best City to Start, is identifying in a very kind of surgical way. Let's take a look at our code and see where those bottlenecks are. An example of one of those bottlenecks is for food entrepreneurs. Our catering license fee for New Haven is $650 for the first year, and then $550 every year after that. And then it's not prorated. And so if an entrepreneur files to cater in April, and then the renewal's in May, they're about $1,200 out within the first year without selling a single jar. And so can we take a look at some of those fines and fees, and also shift our kind of culture around how we think about fines and fees? Our entire budget is around $730 million. Our fines, fees, permits are around $27 million. So they are a revenue driver for us, but I do think ultimately that area of a city or town budget is about behavior change. It's about what do we want to see more of and what do we want to see less of. And I'm a little bit bullish on this, but I'm a big believer that we should fine for the things that we don't want to see, and we should make effectively free or very affordable the things that we do want to see. And so for the catering license fee, what we're proposing is to have a first-year free policy, where we make the first year free or some sort of small nominal fee for the first year, and then cut the fee in half for subsequent years after that. The fiscal impact is really small. In fact, if anything, over the course of time, more entrepreneurs will apply, which will level it out. But also at the end of the day, the catering license fee is $30,000 of our budget. And you know where the real money is? It's in building permits. It's in down the road, once we have a very broad top of funnel, where entrepreneurs get to take a risk, likely fail sometimes succeed, and are able to move through the process. Maybe it's their second time around to be able to actually be successful. And so I think that's ultimately sort of the heart of Best City Start, is certainly some of these surgical changes, but is also trying to shift how we think about this part of our budget as not just about revenue. It's certainly about revenue, but it's also about what we're trying to encourage as a city over the course of time.
That's fantastic. And I just a quick follow-up. You mentioned restaurants and catering, and not once have you mentioned pizza in New Haven. And I was going to have a debate about Torrington pizza versus New Haven pizza, but I wonder, seriously though, is that a thoughtful, it is, New Haven's known for pizza, but I think you're thinking beyond that. Is that a thoughtful thing not to sort of highlight New Haven pizza and carry that narrative and think more deeply?
It's a good question. I think two quick thoughts. One is I think New Haven pizza is extraordinary, and I think I want to elevate something that Rep. Horn said, the relationship between small business, arts and culture, and a sense of a community's identity. I think you brought this up, Representative. And so I think the culture around New Haven pizza is extraordinary for the city. So I do just want to put a finer point, and that is extraordinary. And you're right that New Haven, a city of immigrants, a city of individuals who are trying to build, there are so many different kinds of businesses that are filling commercial corridors like Lizzie's that are also a part of our identity as a city. And I think us being, really trying to own, and both the best city to start, hopefully the best state to start, I think would be extraordinary for Connecticut and is certainly extraordinary for New Haven.
And I just want to further brag on New Haven for a second. I got to go to City Seed last month. And yes, New Haven is a city of pizza, but if you visit City Seed and you learn about their programs, especially with the immigrants who've come to this country who are bringing their food culture with them, oh my gosh, that was the most impressive program that we should be duplicating in other cities throughout the state, between the farmers markets, the ethnic food catering, I guess is the best way to describe it, and the fact that they have this entrepreneurial lab happening there so that people can open these businesses. Slam dunk in terms of arts, culture, and tourism. And so shout out to City Seed because they have figured it out.
Well said.
All right. And that is certainly something, having been involved with Connecticut Main Street now for 20 years, these events are for borrowing, right? There is not a unique circumstance in anything that's being said today that should be shared. So we have a final question, quick lightning round, and then if we have time, we will do a Q&A from the audience. So real quick, where do you see the single biggest opportunity for state or local government to create more vibrant communities, and what's the biggest barrier in the way? Okay, maybe not so quick.
So I will start by making a point that is perhaps obvious in this, but it's worth saying, which is that as Finance Revenue and Bonding Chair, this is the part of the, we can't, when you're crafting a statewide budget, you're often fighting over the, division and, not the spoils, but, you're taking a pie and everybody's fighting over who gets what piece of the pie. This is the part of it that's about growing the pie. And lifting all boats and finding ways to make it, to have people, feel vested in something and to give them the ability to bring more to them and their community and their family, and raise all boats, which has the benefit of producing more revenue for the state of Connecticut, which is good for us. So, I mean, that for us to, I think one of our barriers in terms of how we do budgeting is the sort of short-term focus on what we do. We pass a 2-year budget. It tends to be focused on the things that you can easily put into a spreadsheet and that have numbers attached to them, and they don't, use what we call dynamic scoring, which basically, accounts for the follow-on effect, the investment effect of all of this. And I think that short-term, that's sort of structurally, that's something that gets in our way. I just came from a fiscal conference in which we all, state legislative leaders from across, a bipartisan group of state legislative leaders from across the country, talking about how do we better measure what we're trying to do, both in terms of tax expenditures that invest in certain kinds of businesses. Are they working? Should we redirect those tax dollars to a different industry that's maybe needs more investment? That is a structural challenge that I'm very much aware of, and that we're trying to focus on, trying to move us to a longer-term time horizon to make sure we're not just, have the blinders on and looking only at the next 2 years, but are focused on, because none of this stuff, or very little of it, pays off in the next year. It pays off over time. So that's a challenge, I would say.
I would also bring up another payoff over time. Housing, obviously, Maria chairs Finance, Revenue, and Bonding. I chair Planning and Development, work very closely with the Housing Committee, have worked very closely on housing issues the last 4 years. And I think when you're hearing from disparate groups like CBIA and Pro Homes Connecticut, and I'm sure you see it in your own towns, trying to figure out the smart growth around this, the abundance theory around, we do need more taxpayers. We do have more people who are living alone, or they're living in twos. They're not living in larger family groups. And so really ensuring that we have the appropriate housing to bring the people in to be able to work in the businesses. Yes, we can do so much online, but you're not building a community in Connecticut by working online. You're not, that is a huge challenge moving forward. So I think about Main Street as the connector for so many of these things, because without that, why do you move to a town? Well, in a lot of cases you're having kids, you're looking at the schools. But if you're looking around and it's like, there's no community here, I have to be honest, why would you want to live there, right? I mean, the most exciting thing to me about moving to Avon was actually Collinsville. So because I'm practically a stone's throw from there, which I mean is kind of silly, but it is, it's true that you look for these pockets of places that feel warm and fuzzy and that you're welcomed into them. And so I think that we have to continue looking at our housing options and building smartly, planning smartly. I just came from a planners meeting a couple weeks ago, but that's the kind of thing that we don't want that to hold us back. And I would go back to the tourism and culture and arts. We don't put the money towards it that we should. It has the return. It's been proven it's the return. And we talk a lot about it on appropriations. I sit on appropriations. I'm also one of the subcommittee chairs for conservation and development, which has DECD underneath it, and among many other agencies. But the thing is that we get so wrapped up in these hard line things, and then tourism and culture and arts feels kind of squishy when it's not squishy at all, and it's actually what our communities need in order to drive people in. Like, I didn't even know about that ski jump. That's pretty cool. If you look up on, Travelocity, why you should come to Avon, it's for the Farmington Valley Arts Center. Again, we need to be driving people more to those things, but not just people. The dollars have to be there. And so it's something that we have to continue to think about as we're growing our tax base.
Yeah, well said. I want to echo something that both my fellow panelists lifted up. Small businesses are some of the most trusted institutions in our country right now. I think it's something like 84% of Americans believe that small businesses make a positive impact on our community. It's something that's a shared horizon line for us as a country, is supporting small businesses. And I think, you both elevated this. Small businesses are a place where we're willing to sit across the table from someone who might disagree with us. They're a place where, that gives us a little bit of hope at the end of the day. And I think elevating small businesses is not only something that contributes to our economic vitality, but also is a critical part of our democratic fabric, a critical part of our civic and social life. And treating as such, I think, is really critical to the future in a moment when there's increased loneliness, increased temptation to be more on our phones than more face-to-face with each other. Small businesses play a critical role in challenging some of those forces that are pulling us apart, and instead bring us back together in physical ways that are actually right outside of our door. And so I think it's one of the challenges is all those forces that are keeping us apart, but I think small businesses are critical, and it's an opportunity to think about them as a central pillar of what moving forward as a country looks like over the next 10 to 20 years.
A lot to think about. If we have time, there we go. There's Jennifer.
We'll pass mics to anyone with questions for some Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes.
Don't be shy. I can, oh, you're passing. Oh,
Any
okay.
questions?
I mean, I certainly, oh, Kevin, there we go. Go ahead, Kev.
Well, I just want to, obviously the focus of the panel is policy and its effect on downtown. So there's a gazillion things I could ask you questions on, but I want to keep it focused and just, in part, just bring back up the vacancy tax, for lack of another way to refer to it as. You know, what people don't realize when you're doing economic development in these towns is how much occupancy and ownership matters. And just to give you 2 quick examples, so in New Milford, we had a CVS that closed on Main Street, right next to the post office, right smack in the middle of this idyllic, you know, Norman Rockwell painting, 20,000 square foot CVS that sat empty for a decade. And it sat empty for a decade because the owner was out of state, out of pocket, couldn't be reached. Nothing moved, you know, and as the EDD there at the time, people always said to me, how come you can't get somebody in that space? And it's like, well, for starters, they don't return phone calls. You can't even reach them. They just didn't care. And I remember back then, over a decade ago, thinking, why isn't there something we could do? Isn't there something like a vacancy tax? Something that says, you can't do that. You are messing up this entire town, you know? And thankfully, you know, over time, they eventually, I don't know if they were forced to come to the table, but it's now, you know, broken up and occupied. And another example on a bigger scale is Danbury, downtown Danbury. People used to always say, why is downtown Danbury so dead? And it's like, well, there's 3 owners, and one of them's in jail, and you know, how are you supposed to activate? You can put a lot of flower pots up and down Main Street, Danbury. You can beautify it as much as you can do, but at the end of the day, private ownership and very little control that you can do anything about. So that's not really a question, but I just kind of want to
I mean, yeah, I mean, and it's not, in some cases, it's not truly blight. I mean, in some cases it is. I think about the steakhouse that sat empty, the Dakota Steakhouse that sat empty literally for 15 years, and I kept thinking, man, it must be a heck of a raccoon hotel, because, you know, it was a very blighted situation in Avon, and yet, you know, a business would come in, and for whatever reason, it wouldn't work out, you know, over and over again. But that was like I said, that was the interesting thing, because obviously on the Planning and Development Committee, you have people from all over the state, 2 different parties, and everybody could think of an incident in their town or a space in their town where this was happening. And I understand from a private ownership perspective, it might be better to take the loss, but you're harming our towns. You're harming our cities. And and it's in the same sort of vein as private equity. I mean, it's like we're complaining now so vocally about private equity coming in to all of these different industries, but in a way, that's sort of like the microcosm of private equity, are private owners who are out of state who don't really care what's happening in, you know, New Milford or Danbury or wherever it might be. I understand it's business, and one of the you know, pushbacks was, well, this is going to, you know, businesses aren't going to want to go in there if you know, we're going to lose these. It's like, well, we've already lost them. Like, I don't get, like, that to me is not a valid argument when this spot has sat empty and empty and empty. At some point, you have to have some kind of tool to force the hand. And again, this would have been an option, so if you don't want to use it in your town or your city, you don't have to use it. But for the towns that have experienced what we've experienced, you've got to have something that kind of like gives the hard nudge. Most of our small business owners are fantastic, right? Most of our, you know, owners are great. But you do have a few that create this broken windows kind of situation, and that is incredibly problematic over time. And we're not going to have thriving downtowns if we don't do something about it.
We have a question over here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stay on the vacancy piece. The question really specifically is, what teeth are you going to give these municipalities? And what I really mean is, there are certain ordinances in place, certain legislation, certain statutes in place that say you can do things, but then you enter in protracted long-term legal cases to actually effectuate those things. And at the local level, if we're going to do enforcement, we need the teeth to effectuate that enforcement. And so that brings back to the next point, to you know, economic development directors. These local small towns, medium-sized towns, maybe don't have the capacity then to go after those funds or those fines, right? And so I just want to bring those 2 points and like hope to hear some address, like how those teeth will be added to help enforcement at the local level, but then also how do you plan to address the limited capacity even now to collect fines, to administer violations, and then to use that revenue to have less restrictions on the municipality, how that revenue then gets used on the back end.
So the hope was that the fines would be used, obviously, to help further build that downtown area that you identify as whatever you consider your downtown to be. I would actually love to hear and have conversations with any and all of you about what you would like to see as the teeth, because you know best. You know what would work in your town, and especially to the point of not having enough staff. I completely get that, because we hear that over and over again. Again, my town, our economic development committee is my town manager. We don't have a separate economic development, commission of any kind. I wish we did. The town planner has done some of it as well, because we have the best town planner in the state. But I'm biased. But I hear what you're saying, and you're right. It's very hard, to your point. If the landlord's out of state and you haven't been able to get a hold of them for 5 years, it's great that you're assigning fees, but how do you actually get those fees back when you can't even get a phone call back from? So we still need to be thinking sort of deeper about that. We did have some conversations with a couple different, before we put the bill in, we kept tweaking it, talking to town officials, but I would love to have a further conversation with you about that. And anybody else who's interested in that conversation. I give my phone number out freely, so feel free to, I'll go slowly, 860-559-2093. Happy to give it to you after as well.
I would just add a quick amplification of what Eleni's saying and your question, which is because we've had this conversation in connection not just with the work Eleni's been doing here, but in other areas about, we generally, I think at the Finance Committee, think we control too much of what municipalities, we often have to give them permission to do things, and at least my co-chair and myself are very much of the belief that we'd like to loosen some of that, so that just give municipalities more ability to try things. But to your point, it is very different for small towns than it is for bigger cities. And so when you start with something that we create a municipal option for some towns to be able to do, it enables us to see how it goes and see what works, and then see about taking the next step, still maybe keeping it optional, but setting up some state machinery that can help smaller municipalities actually take advantage of the program, but we have to do it in steps.
And sometimes we do it with population thresholds where it's, and we went back and had to change the blight threshold because it was 25,000 and higher and population. And I think it was Torrington was the reason we ended up going back to fix it, because they were, underneath by,
The
I don't know,
micropolitan,
five bodies. It was really silly. But again, it's sort of like having a pilot program without being a true pilot program.
Are there?
My question has to do with the Main Street as well. And it's kind of as a legislator and also a selectman and a Main Street business owner for 23 years, I am very concerned, as also a founder of the chamber in my town, of something that really wasn't touched upon today. The only thing that I really did hear was that people do like these small businesses on Main Street, that they are attracted to them, that they certainly are a wonderful place to go to socialize and to speak with people. But in my experience, there are many of these small startups that are really desired. People will say, oh, I really want a bookstore, but then they buy their books on Amazon. So they really like a shoe store, and then they go to DSW. My concern is that we, as small towns, do very little in the end of retention. So when small businesses come and they are felt as though they were desired, and then they fail, and people that are owners of those small businesses look at it and say, hey, I'm not wrapping paper to put on your Main Street to make it look pretty at my own expense. So I don't know if you have any ideas on how to retain.
Thank you so much for your question, and just incredibly well said, and thank you for all that you do. It's extraordinary. A few different thoughts. One is one of my favorite programs that I've heard of is the City of Boston has a program for legacy businesses. It's, I think, a $10,000 to $15,000 grant they give to 15 to 20 businesses every year for exactly this premise that you're talking about, that of course it's great to encourage a lot of startups to start and to get their feet under them, but also what about the businesses that have been there for 10, 20, 30 plus years who are anchors where we almost can't even imagine our town without them? Sounds like your business is one of those. And how do we support them, not only to be able to sustain, to potentially be able to grow, and also to be able to pass the torch eventually to a new owner? I think there's actually a lot, that's a pretty rich policy area too, is that succession planning and making policies easier for succession planning to exist. So that's one policy or one investment that I've heard of that has been great in Boston, but I think there's more, a couple other ideas that I want to pass to other folks is around procurement. You know, this is especially true in New Haven. We have some anchor institutions who purchase a lot. You know, Yale University, for example, spends about $1 billion every year on any number of different things. And imagine if just 5% of that went to legacy businesses and also supporting legacy businesses to be able to grow a little bit, to be able to fulfill on some of those orders. And I think we haven't done quite enough as a state and certainly as a city in thinking about what are the institutions that are spending dollars right now and how are they supporting some of our legacy businesses who are actually primed to be able to support everything from providing all the toys for graduation to the cookies that are in the dining halls, or any number of different ways that anchor institutions spend dollars, is another thing that comes to mind that I think is a sort of a systems level challenge that I'm not sure if that nut has quite been cracked in some cities and towns, and would be an exciting one to work on. Maybe the only last one would be about storefront facades. I completely agree. You know, in the city of New Haven, for example, we provide a storefront facade program. I think it's up to $30,000, but it has to be matched. I'm curious if this is your experience as well, which is tough. It's tough to be able to invest 5, 7, 10K to be able to receive that matching grant for storefront facades. And I wonder if there's some pretty creative solutions that we can come up with to make it easier for a legacy businesses like yours, who's been around for a long time, to have access to some of these pools of funds that can help be, you know, catalytic for businesses. So those are just 3 that come to mind, but would love to talk more about it.
No, I will echo what you said, and I also have, for me, it varies so much by town. There are some towns that really maintain that relationship with their legacy businesses and make sure that, you know, they're a part of it, and others that just do not. And we all have locations in towns that just seem cursed, which on paper should be great locations, but they're just bouncing all the time perhaps because no one's having the conversation that you just mentioned about, like, how do we keep you here? How do we make it continue to work? You obviously were willing to take the risk to start it up and all the money and investment that took. What do we do to keep it successful?
My concern is that a lot of times with Main Street organizations and also other, you know, drivers, I would call them, they'll send out surveys and ask people what they would like to see on the Main Street. I think that perhaps what they should ask is, what business would you financially be willing to support?
And thank you so much. That's all the time we have for questions. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists and moderator?